Tarry here, where the stories never grow old, and you hear something new every time they are told, and it comes clear. So tarry here, where it doesn't matter your age, and when we gather round the table, we all take the stage year after year. So tarry here.
Welcome to the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour at enlightenradio.org. I'm Fanny Crawford.
And I'm Stash Ziolkowski.
Today is Monday, May 6, 2024. Our theme today is National Children's Book Week. And we're going to be telling some stories and talking about children's books and how we got here.
Yeah.
How are you, Stash?
Oh, I'm fine. I'm feeling pretty good. Yeah. It's been it's been challenging. With Brother Tony. Every day is Brother Tony Day now, since he's now close.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah, it used to be Brother Tony Tuesday, and sometimes Brother Tony, different days of the week when we would drive down towards Baltimore, and but he's been here now in Martinsburg for 30. Today is his 30th day being here. We moved him 4 weeks and 2 days ago, and since then he's spent 9 days at his new assisted living facility, and 10 days, I guess, in rehab so far. No, in a hospital where he had a heart attack and did get a pacemaker put in, and then now he's in rehab. and probably I can say this because he doesn't. He doesn't hear us. He is probably where he's going to stay for the rest of his life. This rehab facility is also a long-term care facility, and he's not going to get strong enough, I believe, to go back to a regular facility. His legs are even worse than mine, which are bad. And, he's going through physical therapy, but he can hardly stand up. He has to be in a wheelchair every place he goes. And so we've filed all the paperwork, and hopefully he, what's that thing? Medicaid, hopefully is going to kick in, and along with his pension paying for stuff and Medicaid, he will be able to stay in this facility and be taken care of for the rest of his life.
How are his spirits?
Oh, pretty good. My brother has a remarkable sense of being friendly with people. He really respects the workers who take care of him. He's always very kind to them. He's always thankful to them, appreciates it, and he's very good at joking. He's really good at at making smart remarks that are not hurtful. He's really good at that, and he laughs a lot, and people like him. Every place, all my life, I've always envied him. My brother, he's always the guy that, Tony's a good old boy.
When I'm going to come visit you at least one time while Terry's away, coming up, and I thought maybe you would take me to meet Tony because I've never met him.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Wouldn't that be fun?
He would love that.
Yeah, I would love that too.
That would be fun. Yeah, because it's only 2 miles from my house. and I go there every day and spend a couple hours with him, and we talk, and sometimes he falls asleep, and usually after I've been there for an hour and a half or so, and he might start to close his eyes. He gets tired, and I'll eventually just give him a hug, I guess, and say, "Brother, I think you need a nap," and so do I. and I do. I go home and take a nap.
That sounds
So
wonderful.
yeah, but he's in good spirits, and he's really thankful for me and Terry, and his family has supported him in this, and they helped us with this move and everything. And he calls Terry his guardian angel and his boss, and he'll always say, "Whatever you and the boss decide is fine with me. You guys have taken such good care of me. Whatever you think is best out, that's what I'm doing."
How often do his kids get to see him?
Well, they live all the way down at Ocean. They live near Ocean City, you
Wow.
know, and
Oh,
so that's a hell of a
yeah,
haul,
just coming
you know.
across the Bay Bridge is a big deal.
Right, and so they come to see him every once in a while. Um, his son and daughter-in-law and two grandsons, 14 and 16, and I recently wrote, just a couple days ago, I wrote a letter to Missy, the mom, and just I wanted to tell her how good it was for Tony, and a reminder to me of what it's like to see a good, strong family.
Mhm.
My nephew Paul is in his 40s. He's a retired prison guard, and works in a job of moving. Um, uh, I guess you'd call them people, prisoners, or people in
Mhm.
trouble with the law, moving them to facilities and stuff. That's his new job after he retired. Um, very big, strong guy, and he is an absolute perfect reminder of our dad. Our dad was a big, strong construction foreman, very physical uh, abilities, and but quiet, gentle. He never had to throw his weight around or something like that. And Paul is very much like that, and he's even named after my father. He has the same name, and uh, and Missy has two wild teenage boys, and she's a great mom, and I mentioned to her, I said, I think of her as a wrangler. She really keeps those, you know, they really, those guys are typical teenagers who live on the Eastern Shore, have a lot of freedom that kids in a city don't have. You know, they have like like cars that are beat up, old like Roadrunner
Jalopies,
things. Not a real car, but
stock
I
cars,
don't
stock cars.
like like uh, go karts almost, but with motors and stuff that they've
Mhm.
worked on, and they get to ride all over the place in them, and they do all kind of things. They go fishing together. They have just and I know they're a bit of a handful, but we spent an entire day when they came up, and they helped move Tony's stuff up to Martinsburg, and we spent actually 2 days getting him settled in and everything. And I wrote her a note just tell her how heartfelt it was that I got to see that family together and show so much love to for the boys, to their grandfather, from Paul and Missy to Paul, to my brother Tony. And it was just wonderful to see that kind of that love, and I made me reminded me of when Tony and I were young, and we've always been great pals. He's been my best friend for my whole life. He's always been a good model for me and always kept me out of trouble and taught me things. And we had a great relationship, like his two grandsons. And our parents took good care of us, and we had a lot of fun in our family. So it was a really nice thing as far as for all of that. So anyway,
Very good.
yeah.
Do you want to talk about Speak first, or do you want to tell a story first?
Well, yeah, Speak coming up, and I know I'm a disappointment to you and Adam as far as the people who run these great programs for storytelling, that I don't
What do
show
you
up.
mean? You're not a disappointment. You have
Well,
done
I'm
more than
disappointed
your
that
share.
well, thank you, but I haven't been to Speak at all this year, except by Zoom, and
That counts.
I know. It's just amazing that when the sun's going down, I'm reluctant to get in the car and go anyplace unless I really have to. And because of Zoom, I can say, "Oh, well, let's just watch the storyteller and have a drink while we're watching it." It's a lot easier. And then, of course, on the 20th, when Terry's coming home from her one of her kind of not annual but periodic meetings of the Iron Triangle, Terry and Jane and Ruth Ann, three friends who have been friends for 65 years or more, ever since grade school. And every few years they get together. We have visited them at their homes, and they have visited us. And we went on vacation with Jane and her husband, and we did a vacation thing with Ruth Ann in South Dakota. And these three women have been a tight knit group, and they're called the Iron Triangle ever since middle school or something. And it's really a neat thing, So I'm glad that they do that. It'll be fun for Terry to see her friends, and
Very good.
So, yeah. And Terry's birthday is this week, and I gave her an incredible birthday present of a gift certificate for a massage from the massage therapist I go to. So she's very happy about that.
So finish telling us about Speak.
And Speak is going like crazy. And coming up on May 14th, we have Elizabeth Rose, who was scheduled to be telling stories last year, but something happened and she had to be moved to this year's program. So I'm looking forward to that. And then in June, Dolores Hydock. These ladies will be speaking on the second Tuesday of the month at 7:30 in the community center in Shepherdstown. And you can go to speakstoryseries.com to get all details, and you can get tickets, season tickets you want, or if you want to donate, you can donate money, or if you want to sponsor a storyteller, you can do that. And in November, the 2024 commission piece, storytelling, will be done. And I believe that Adam will be announcing the winner of the competition for this commissioned piece.
Yeah, it's up online.
Oh, did he put it up on there?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
why don't you give the website?
I have it. I can check it.
No,
SpeakStorySeries.com.
Yes.
SpeakStories.com. Right. And
Speak Story Series.
I didn't know that the name had been announced yet.
I don't remember her name. It's not someone that I knew.
Okay, so,
But
after I dropped off
sounded
the
really good.
board, I don't see everything as I used to,
Yep. Okay.
It's
All right. Well, I will either see you
interesting.
on Zoom or I will let you know that I was there in person.
Okay, that'll be good. That'll be great. Yeah.
So,
See, and
so
that's the night, the 14th is the night before Terry will be leaving.
mhm,
And so early in the morning, we'll be going down to Baltimore. Terry
right.
will drive me to Baltimore to the airport. And then when she gets out of the car and takes her bags and goes into the airport, I will take my time coming home very slowly. And
Very
it'll be
good.
early in the morning. So there won't be much traffic and it'll be an easy drive.
Sounds good.
And,
Well,
yeah.
I want to talk about little golden books for National Children's Book
Oh,
Week
well,
this
cool.
week. I pulled out my stack of little golden books.
Oh,
Um, I don't have hundreds. I only have maybe
60.
25. No, I think I only have about 20.
Wow.
But what I really love about them is that some of them were my favorite books as a child before they became little golden books. So the idea that they became accessible to lots more children because they were sold in grocery stores and drug stores and all over the place, even hardware stores,
Right. Yeah.
always brought joy to my heart knowing that some of my favorite books were available to so many children. And they started being published as a series in September 1942. There were 12 titles, at least one of which I have here on my shelf. So The Three Little Kittens by Marie Stern, Bedtime Stories by Gustav Tenggren, Mother Goose by Phyllis Fraser, Prayers for Children, The Little Red Hen by Rudolph Frund, Nursery Songs, Leah Gale, Alphabet from A to Z, another Leah Gale. Pokey Little Puppy is probably one of my very favorite books in all the world. And I had a really contentious relationship with that book as a child because I was always unhappy at the way the mother dog treated the Pokey Puppy, just because he wandered a bit. He got no dessert multiple times because he was being punished. And that always made me poke my lower lip out as I was listening to that story read by my parents. So that's number 8 in that first series, The Golden Book of Fairy Tales, Winfield Scott Hoskins, Baby's Book of Objects, Animals of Farmer Jones, another Leah Gale, illustrated by Richard Scarry, who of course many of us discovered in a lot of different books. And This Little Piggy and Other Counting Rhymes, Phyllis Surf Wagner. And just talking about the illustrator, I fell down a rabbit hole there and have a whole lot to tell you about Garth Williams, who illustrated the Little House on the Prairie books, that series, Stuart Little and Charlotte's Web, but did a lot of work for the Little Golden Book series.
Illustrators, it's amazing. And I tried to get, over the years, I tried to get someone to illustrate some stories for me. And it was very difficult. Even at one point, a professional artist who knew people who did illustrating and stuff like that took me. He has since passed away, but he and I became good friends. And he introduced me to a person and with one of my stories. And I was very disappointed because the cost for this professional, it was someone in New England, and I was there visiting the artist at the time, and the cost would have been incredible, and I, far more than I was willing to put out in order to have one of my stories have pictures drawn for it, Um, and the lady was very nice, but she explained that she had a lineup of people with work for her, and um, that it was a expensive thing. Um,
Uh-huh.
and once I did pay a high school girl, a friend of my daughter's, um, uh, and she did beautiful illustration for a story of mine, and I offered her a contract. I paid her a couple $100 to as just upfront, free, if she would do some drawings for me for this story. And I said, I'll pay you to do the drawings, and then if we get along and we like each other, and you want to work with me, I would, you and I could try to get this book published, and you would get, your name on it, just like mine. I'll as the author, you as an illustrator, and we were set to do that, but her father quashed the deal. Her father thought there was something wrong with a man my age at the time. I guess I was in my 50s, um, willing to spend money on a high school girl to illustrate my stories, and he wouldn't even he wouldn't even agree to sit down with me and meet me and talk with me and his wife and his daughter about this, you know. Um, and I guess the sore point with him was at the time that I was divorced, and I was a bachelor living in a little apartment and stuff. And I don't know, he probably thought I was some kind of a pervert or something. And and I got the impression that he thought, what kind of a man writes stories for children and then pays some pretty young girl to illustrate them? I was insulted by his attitude, um, and the fact that he wouldn't even meet me in person to get to know me or anything like that. But he in no uncertain terms, and it was a shame because the girl, was teary eyed when she told me about her dad, and said he would talk to me on the phone, but he didn't want to meet me and all. He thought it was weird, and um, it's a shame, because it's a talent that I don't have. I would love to be able to illustrate, and I can't. You know, if I was illustrating a book about rooms, it'd be fine because I can draw rooms. But if I have to put animate things in it, like a kitten or a human being, then it becomes a joke.
That's okay. Um, I was going to say, tell us a story, but you
Okay.
just did. But you should tell us one that you prepared.
Okay. Well, this is from a different kind of book. This is from a book for children, but this is a book that I got um, from a storyteller by the name of Chenga Solga, who I believe you heard tell at stories at Speak Stories
I did, and I've
a,
told several of her stories from her books.
a number of years ago, and I was able to take her to a school when at Speak when we have storytellers come in. They also go to a school, or we make arrangements for them to go to a school, and the school doesn't pay anything, and they have this professional storyteller, and she was marvelous. She really was very good. But she put out this book while she was here studying. She was from Hungary. She was here studying on a scholarship, a Fulbright kind of scholarship, and she put out a book that was called Tales of Superhuman Powers that she had collected from around the world. And so um, this is a book with 55 stories about people who have superpowers, and they're from all different places. And this one is called the Winged Prince, and the superpower is flight, um, the ability to fly with mechanical wings, and it came from Hungary. And this is for young children, ages 6 and older. And so here we go. Once upon a time, there was a king whose only daughter was as beautiful as the most brilliant star in the sky. When she was old enough to marry, dozens of suitors came to ask her, but it was the poorest of the young princes that caught the princess's eye. Naturally, the king did not like this at all. He wanted his daughter to marry the richest of the suitors for her own good and the kingdom's. When the princess refused, he grew furious and locked her up in a tower, telling her she was not allowed to leave until she had changed her mind. A kind and understanding father who just wanted to have his way so that he didn't have to think about a dowry and stuff. The king did not know this, but the princess was not alone. Every night her lover visited her in the tower. How? The prince had a servant who could craft marvelous things with his own hands. The servant made the prince a pair of wings. As soon as the sun set, he flew up into the air at the edge of the royal city and landed on the balcony of the princess's tower, meeting with her in secret behind the king's back. This went on for a week or two, until one day the king decided to pay his daughter a visit to see if she had changed her mind. He arrived at the worst possible moment. He found the princess and her lover embracing each other, planning her escape from the tower. The king's fury returned as only a father's can. He drew a sword, his curved sword, to kill the prince right there and then. But the young man was faster. With a flap of his wings, he threw himself out the window and flew back to his own castle in the woods. The king called for his carriage right away, drawn by 6 black horses, and he rode out to the woods. Now he knew the prince had been hiding out there to be closer to the princess. After the carriage rode an entire contingent of soldiers that surrounded the prince's castle, while the king himself marched inside. The first room of the castle was empty. The second room had 2 beds, 2 chairs, and a chest. In the third room, he found the prince sitting at a desk, writing a sad poem about his love. "You, winged prince," roared the king, "were you the one visiting my daughter?" "Yes, your highness. I cannot deny it. And even if I could, I would not." "Well, if it was you, I will strike you down right here and now." The prince looked at the king and spoke very politely. "Your highness, if you wish to punish us for what we have done, at least let us die together. Take me back to your palace, tie me to the princess, and throw us from the tower." "If that is all you wish for, I am happy to oblige," said the king. "You two shall die together for causing me such grief." What a grump. The soldiers escorted the prince back to the palace. There they tied him together with the princess and pushed him from the tower, but they did not fall to the ground. The prince strained his wings once, twice, 3 times, and the ropes broke. Stretching his wings to the sky, he flew away with the princess in his arms, faster than the wind. The king could yell after them all he wanted. Threats or promises, they did not turn around. The prince flew back to the court of his own father, held the wedding there right away. By the time the princess's father caught up with them, they were already husband and wife. There was nothing left for him but a handful of morsels from the wedding feast. And they lived happily ever after.
I remember that story.
I like that story.
You've either told that before.
I like it very much.
Myself in Chenga Salka's book. Good one.
I think that's lovely. It's a very simple one, and it's ideal for young people, and then nobody gets killed in it, so that's good. No
almost, but not quite.
Almost, yeah. The girl's father is actually a pain in the butt.
Yeah. Yes.
Imagine going to throw his daughter out the window.
Well, that reminds me of a little golden book that I had pulled off the shelf, the 12 Dancing Princesses. And again, this is an old fairy tale. Was written up by the Grimm brothers. It was a Grimm fairy tale. In this little golden book version, it's retold by Diane Muldrow and illustrated by Fred Marvin, who illustrated a lot of books for little golden books, but for the series. But this, what reminded me of this story is your story, because again, this is an angry father trying to keep princesses under control.
Good luck.
With similar results, yes. I think we have time for me to tell this one.
Of course.
The 12 Dancing Princesses. Come a little closer, and I will tell you about a king who had 12 lively and beautiful daughters. The princesses slept in the great hall of the castle, their beds all in a row. Good night, my daughters, their father said each night, and then he locked the door behind him to keep his loved ones safe. But each morning when the door was unlocked, what do you think the king found? 12 pairs of dainty dancing shoes worn through with holes. No one could say how this came to pass. The king announced that any young man who could discover where his daughters danced each night would inherit the throne and win one of his daughters for a bride. But whoever did not succeed within 3 days and nights would be sent away from the kingdom forever. One day, a soldier came home from the wars and met an old woman who asked where he was going. Haven't decided, he replied, and added with a laugh, unless it's to find where the king's daughters dance every night and so become king. The woman beckoned him closer. That is not as difficult as it seems, she whispered. Just don't drink anything the princesses offer you, and take this cloak. It will make you invisible to others. Oh, thank you, dear woman, said the soldier. He went straight to the king's court, where he was welcomed with new clothes and a chamber off the great hall. That evening, the eldest princess appeared with a hot drink, saying, Drink quickly, sir, for it will not stay warm for long. The soldier pretended to drink, but the liquid ran down into a sponge he had tied under his chin. And then he lay down and pretended to snore. The sisters laughed at this and said, Sleep well, soldier. Bringing out elegant gowns, they dressed themselves before their mirrors, arranged each other's hair, and whispered excitedly about the ball they would attend that night. But the youngest daughter said, I feel so strange tonight, as if something's hanging over us. Be a goose, replied the eldest. I hardly needed to give that soldier a sleeping potion. The fool would have fallen asleep anyway. When all were dressed and ready, they quieted themselves, peered closely at the soldier, who pretended to be asleep. And the eldest princess then tapped her bed. It sank into the earth. The 12 young women descended one by one into the opening with the soldier behind them, invisible in his cloak. Halfway down, he stepped on the youngest daughter's dress. Who's pulling at my gown? Cried the frightened girl. Don't be silly, chided her eldest sister. You have caught it on a nail. At the bottom of the staircase stretched a long avenue of trees with the leaves of sparkling silver. And said the soldier to himself, one of these leaves will be proof to the king that I followed his daughters. And with that, he broke off a twig. The youngest daughter jumped at the sound. What was that noise? But her sisters only laughed. The merry group turned onto another avenue where the leaves were gold, and then onto a third where trees twinkled with diamonds. On each avenue, the soldier broke off twigs from the trees. Crack, crack. causing the youngest to shake with fear. The princesses arrived at the banks of a lake where 12 pretty boats floated with a prince waiting in each one. The soldier was quick to follow the youngest princess into her boat. "Our boat feels so much heavier today," remarked the prince. "I have to use all my strength to row across." Across the water was a palace blazing with lights. Sweet music drifted through open doorways. There, the soldier watched the princesses dance until 3 o'clock in the morning, when one of them said, "Oh dear, I can dance no more. My shoes are worn through with holes." "Mine too, and mine," chimed in the others. And so it was time for the princes to ferry their ladies back across the lake. This time, the soldier rowed back with the eldest princess. While the young ladies bid goodnight to their princess, the soldier quickly ran back to the palace, crawled into bed, and closed his eyes. The princesses slowly climbed the stairs and heard him snore so loudly, they said, "Oh, we are quite safe from him." They hung up their beautiful dresses and went to sleep. Next morning, the soldier told no one what he had seen. He wanted to see those sparkling trees and the palace again. And so on the second and third nights, he followed the princesses as before. On the third night, he took a golden cup as proof of his visit. The soldier was summoned before the king the next day. "How do my daughters wear out their dancing shoes each night?" asked the king. "Your Highness, they travel to an underground castle and dance with 12 princes until 3 o'clock in the morning," replied the soldier. He presented to the astonished king the 3 branches and the golden cup. "Isn't it true?" roared the king. The daughters could not deny it. So the king said, "Soldiers, which of my daughters will you have for a wife?" "Oh, I am no longer young," answered the soldier. "I will marry your eldest daughter if she will have me." The eldest realized that the soldier was not a fool after all, and would be the future king. For the first time, she smiled at that soldier. Holding out her hand, she said, "Yes, I will." There was a large wedding. The king forgave his naughty daughters, and the day was a happy one. The lovely bride and her sisters danced until, yes, my dears, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Wonderful.
I remember debating before I actually bought that book. I read it through
Really?
and thought, I'm not sure I like this story.
Oh, wow.
But I did. I have enjoyed reading it. And
Yeah.
several small groups of children have enjoyed it when I've read it to them. I wanted to talk about another book and another illustrator. The other book I wanted to talk about is Mr. Meyer's Cow, as told by Miss Frances. Do you remember Miss Frances, who had a TV show and the Ding Dong School on television?
Really?
Frances Horwich, Dr. Frances Horwich.
And you could look at the screen and see that?
Yeah.
Hi, boys and girls. I do remember that.
Yeah, well, she had a whole bunch of books, apparently, but this is the only one I have, and it's about Sally and a big white cow. But it's from 1955, which it's not the oldest little golden book I have, but it's up there. And it says it was in the library at Luckett School in outside of Leesburg, Virginia, which is where I used to live. About 2 miles from Luckett's school, the elementary school there.
Leesburg.
And it belonged to a child named Irving. And it looks like an adult wrote that. So maybe the librarian's name was Irving. One of the things I always liked about Little Golden Books is that there used to be a place. I don't know if this is true on the newer ones, but on the older ones, there was a place for you to write your name inside. This little golden book belongs to, and then you could write your name in there. And most of the ones I've bought are used, so most of them have names in them. But I remember Miss Frances, and that book reminded me of it. And then I have this book is not a little golden book, but it's a Prince Valiant.
Ooh.
And when I was a kid, I read Prince Valiant in the funny papers every single week. It was my very favorite comic strip. And
on the Sunday comics.
In the Sunday comics by Hal Foster. And this one is from the beginning of that series. It's a reprint of a comic that was in the paper, but it's part of the Treasure Book series, which was a whole different publisher, although the exact same format and look as the Golden Books. It just doesn't have that gold binding on the side. So that's one of my favorites. This in this story about Prince Valiant, this is how he came to be in King Arthur's court. And I had forgotten how the story went, but I just read it over again this week in preparation. But I also wanted to talk about Garth Williams, who illustrated a whole series of little golden books, many other books besides. One of the things I liked about, I think I already said a version of this statement, that one of the reasons I liked the golden books so much as a child is that they were reprints of books that my mother, who was a librarian, had bought me in more expensive versions. So I had a pretty big bookcase even by the time I was 4 and 5 years old. And many of the books that I had in that bookcase were later put out in a shorter, smaller version, sometimes with the same illustrator, sometimes not, as part of the Golden Book series. And that's true for some of the books that Garth Williams illustrated. But I did not know this until I just was reading about Garth Williams. I looked up some of the illustrators for the little golden books, and Garth Williams was quite prolific in addition to doing illustrations for E.B. White, Stuart Little, and Charlotte's Web, and many other books. The Little House on the Prairie series. He was part of a controversy. He illustrated a book he wrote himself in 1958. He did write several books himself for children, and this one was called The Rabbit's Wedding. Have you heard of this book, Stash? Does it sound familiar? Well, I didn't know anything about this until I read about it online. In 1958, Garth Williams wrote and illustrated a picture book called The Rabbit's Wedding. It was aimed at children aged 3 to 7, and it showed illustrations of animals in a moonlit forest attending the wedding of a white rabbit to a black rabbit. Can you guess what happened next? A year later, Alabama Senator E.O. Edens, I don't know what the E.O. stands for. I haven't gotten that far in my research, but he was senator from Alabama, began a campaign with the support of the White Citizens Council of Alabama and other segregationist groups, demanding that book be removed from all Alabama libraries. It was a popular book even that year. It was new, just published, and a lot of libraries had already purchased the book all over the South, not just in Alabama. But the White Citizens Council and Senator E.O. Edens perceived themes of racial integration and interracial marriage in that book. And they went to war But the state library director, Emily Willock Reed, was apparently a brave and influential person. And although she had not been involved in other controversies like this, as far as I know, she had not taken stands on the issue of segregation. When they impinged upon her library system, she felt it was her duty to fight back. And she reviewed the book herself. She found no objectionable content in it. She did not see how anybody could see segregationist issues or anything about race in the book. And she went to war. She gathered other librarians, not just in Alabama, but all across the country. But she got the librarians of Alabama pretty riled up. And they were pretty influential. So that in the end, the book was not banned, even in Alabama, but it was sometimes placed on a special reserve shelf. If the state was funding the purchase of these books, then some libraries were forced to put them on reserve shelves so that parents had to check them out. Children were not permitted to check them out on their own. And many libraries actually bought extra copies of the book if they were not funded by the state, so that they could have extra copies available. But I liked Garth Williams' rebuttal, or his explanation of his stand during all this controversy. Quote, "I was completely unaware that animals with white fur, such as white polar bears, white dogs, and white rabbits, were considered blood relations of white human beings. I was only aware that a white horse next to a black horse looks very picturesque." Williams said his story was not written for adults who will not understand it, who, quote, "will not understand it because it is only about a soft, furry love and has no hidden message of hate," unquote. So you see, when you start researching children's books, you find all kinds of things that you weren't expecting. That was one of the gems that I found. Stash, you are muted, and I bet our radio audience would like to.
Yes, sorry. I'm always amazed at how people will find a way to criticize the other. You know, I think that's what EO stands for, every other. But he obviously did not like others. And, you know, and that, what a shame, you know, how, you know, it's like, if you put
Senator E.O. Edens. I had never heard of him, but apparently he made
every other Edens. There you go. I hate every other person in the world. And that's the way it ought to be. Don't you dare to let any children get together unless they have the same color. And in his defense, he would say, and I have no problem with two black children playing together. That's the way God meant it to be. You know, I could just hear him ranting and raving. Boy.
We are just about, well, let me check my time.
I think it's 48 minutes.
Oh, so we do have a few more minutes. Do you have another story you want to do?
Well, I'm not sure. The one I have is
Longer.
It's about. I think I could certainly. I think so. Let's try it. John can cut it off if he has to. All right.
Okay.
It's another story from Hungary. All right. Let's see. This is for young children, age group 4. Okay. Once upon a time, there was a princess. She had a very specific gift. She could see everything, not just things near and far, but also things that were hidden. People in the other rooms of her castle, fish deep in the sea, gold in the belly of the mountains, and ladybugs hiding in the forest, half a world away. Guess what her favorite game was? Looking at other things. In time, the princess grew up and it was time for her to marry. But there was a little problem with the wedding. Whoever came to the castle to ask for her hand in marriage was all nice and polite face to face, but when they thought nobody could see them, they all did things that upset the princess because she could see through the walls. She could see them making faces, stealing small things from the castle, even wooing other women. Finally, the princess said to her father, Papa, I'm only going to marry a man who can hide from me so I cannot see him. The challenge was on. Princes, knights, barons, and adventurers gathered to try and win the princess, but no matter where they hid, she could see each and every one of them, and they all failed the test. In the meantime, not too far from the castle lived a young boy whose name was Peter. He had bright green eyes and a mischievous smile. Because he spent most of his time wandering in the forest and climbing trees, people called him Green Peter. He lived with his mother, his father, and his little sister. But one day, when the children were still quite young, their mother fell ill and died. Because their father was a farmer and he spent all his time on the fields, he decided to marry again, to have someone in the house to look after the children. The new wife, however, could not stand Peter and his sister. She was cruel to them, and when their father was not around, she even beat them sometimes. One day, she decided to get rid of them once and for all, and as they sat down for dinner, she slipped poison into their food. That would have been the end of the children, if not for the white dove that flew in through the open window and pecked at Peter's hand, whispering, Poison, poison, until he dropped the spoon, took his sister by the hand, and ran out of the house. Brother and sister traveled for a very long time, wandering the dusty roads and narrow paths. One day, as they were walking along, Peter noticed a young bird on the ground below a tree. It had fallen out of its nest and was too young to fly. So it just hobbled up on the grass, crying. Peter felt sorry for the little bird, so he picked it up, climbed the tree fast as a squirrel, and placed the tiny creature back into the nest. As the siblings traveled on, they came across a river. On the riverbank, there was a tiny fish. It was stranded in the sand. Peter picked it up and threw it back into the water. The fish was gone in a flash of silver. They were walking toward the king's city when they stopped to rest on the side of the road. Looking around, Peter saw a large rose bush that was all dried up and withered. What a pity. This bush could be so magnificent if someone watered it. It would be big enough to offer some shade for travelers like us. Peter walked down to the river, brought water in his hat, and watered the bush before they walked on. They did not have to walk for long before they started meeting people on the road. Everyone they met was talking about one thing, and one thing only, the challenge for the princess. Anyone who could hide from her at least once out of 3 times the king was growing impatient, could marry into the royal family. This chance only comes once in a lifetime. Peter went straight to the castle and told the king he wanted to try. He was told that he had till the next morning to find himself a hiding place, or even better, get permanently lost. Where does someone hide from a princess who can see a mole digging a tunnel under a mountain? Peter wandered around all day trying to hide here and there, but nothing felt quite right. Toward evening, he was getting desperate and wandered into the royal garden. He was about to give up any hope of a better life and sat down when he heard a little chirp above. He looked up, and there was his bird, the one he rescued, high above him on a branch. What's the matter, Peter? Why are you so sad? Ha! He told the little talking bird, his friend, everything that happened. Is that all? I can help you with that. Stay right here, and I will bring help. The bird flew away and some time later returned, but it was not alone. Following the tiny creature, there was a giant eagle, big enough for a man to ride. It landed right in front of Peter and offered its back. Once Peter was sitting comfortably and holding onto the thick feathers, the eagle rose up high into the air and flew higher and higher and higher until it found a hiding place behind the sun. Morning came and the princess walked out into the garden. Come out, Peter, from behind the sun. I can see you. She only searched for a few moments before she called out. The eagle flew back down, and Peter, disappointed that he was found, walked back to the castle. 2 more days left for him to hide. As he was sitting there, Peter walked over to the river, put his feet in the water, As he was sitting there, a very familiar little fish poked up his head. "What's the matter, Peter? Why are you so sad?" Peter told the fish all his sorrows, and the fish chuckled. "Is that all? Stay right here and wait for me." Some time later, the fish returned, followed by another fish, big enough to swallow a manhole. It opened its mouth, and after some nudging from his friend, Peter walked into the enormous mouth, down into an enormous dark stomach. The great fish then swam down, deep into the river, and buried itself in the mud. The next morning, the princess walked out into the garden, rubbed her eyes, spun around on her ear, and called out at once, come out, Peter, from the belly of the fish, from the bottom of the river. I can see you." The great fish swam back to the surface, and very distressed, Peter climbed out of its stomach. Now he had only one more chance to try, and he did not have any more ideas. He spent the rest of the day sitting in the garden thinking about this. As he sat there in the evening shadows, he suddenly heard a voice. "Peter, what's wrong? Why are you so sad?" And Peter looked around, but he could not see anyone. "Tell me what is the matter with us, Peter. Maybe I can help." It was the rose bush right next to him. He barely recognized it. It was lush, green, and full of beautiful red flowers. Once he got over his surprise, Peter told the bush all that had happened. "Is that all? Come over here, Peter. I will hide you." Peter walked closer, cautiously, since the bush had thorns, not just flowers, but he stepped up to it, bush, and it opened up, embraced him, and turned him into a fresh red rose. The next morning, the princess walked out into the garden once again. As she walked past the rose bush, the scent of the flowers was so sweet and strong that she stopped and buried her face in them for a moment. Before she walked on, she picked the most beautiful of the flowers and put it in her hair. Then, just like every other morning, the princess once again rubbed her eyes, spun around her heel, and looked, but no matter how hard she looked, she could not find Peter. Peter, come out wherever you are. I can't see you." "I am right here, princess," the voice answered, and the flower that was in her hair turned back into a fine young man. "I have been this close to you all along." Peter won the challenge, and the princess's hand with it. She didn't mind. She liked the young man with the bright green eyes. Peter brought his little sister to the palace. In time, he became a king. The princess became his queen, and the little sister became a princess. They all lived happily ever after.
Good old Chengazalka.
Yeah, isn't that wonderful?
So many great stories in that book.
I like that story very much. I would enjoy reading that to a group of 4-year-olds, because I would ad-lib some things there.
And
being swallowed by a giant fish. Ooh.
Well, we are at the end of our time and our radio show today about National Children's Book Day. This is Fanny Crawford
and Stas Zielkowski.
We've been your co-hosts for the Enlighten Radio Storytelling Hour today at Enlighten Radio. We are enlightenradio.org. We are independent community radio broadcasting from Bolivar, West Virginia, Martinsburg, West Virginia, and Hagerstown, Maryland. Offering listeners a window into the world of storytelling by traditional and non-traditional tellers, encouraging our listening community to share, preserve, and expand all of our stories. I see John Case is back with us, and he's going to tell you about what's up next.
Country music. Very country. Right. Actually, going back to covers of Hank Williams.
Hank Williams.
Lovesick World. Actually, I have Tammy Wynette and George Jones post their divorce singing together, D-I-V-O-C-E.
Oh, that's a good
one.
Whoa.
So anything for the
George
money. I got to go get my pancakes off the grill, guys. So
all right.
I'm going to stop the recording.
We don't want to hold you up.
Yeah.